Hey, what up YouTube, and welcome back to a new video with Rams Fan YT. In less than an hour, the championship season is due to start. And we've got the championship season, therefore, to predict. Some people say it's the most unpredictable and exciting league. I certainly think it's one of the most exciting leagues in the world, but I'm hoping it's not too unpredictable, and I'm hoping to get a clean sweep of right answers or right predictions this season round. I think it's probably one of the strongest championships we had in quite some time. Obviously, let me know what your predictions are for this upcoming league. Who you think are going to be dark horses? Who do you think is going to be promoted, make the playoffs? Who do you think is going to be relegated? But let's get straight into this with my predictions in 24th. Unsurprisingly, I've gone with Sheffield Wednesday. Sorry to any Wednesday fans, but I obviously have to put Wednesday in last place. I'm sure every single other YouTuber and predictions has got exactly the same thing said as I have. Daniel Roll has now left, and I do feel for Henrik Pedersen coming as the manager, albeit I don't think he's had that good of a track record with clubs, often dragging them into relegation battles, even without the financial and problems and stuff behind the scenes of Wednesday. It is especially hard when all the best players are leaving for nothing, really, with Chansiri just asset stripping the club at the moment. They hardly even have a team to start the season, with the goalkeeper being Pierce Charles, last time I checked, who has only ever made 8 appearances in men's football. They have 5 senior defenders, albeit I do think Liam Palmer, who is a faithful servant to the club, having been there since 2010, and Dominic Iorfa, who has been there since 2019, are good players to have, even though they are in their 30s now. Nathaniel Shalabar is a good option in defensive midfield. Jamal Lowe is a winger most of the championship is familiar with. Barry Bannon, I must give a huge shout out to. With him being one of the Wednesday's highest earners, he's not been paid in 3 months. And as with all players, he had a chance to leave on a free. And there's lots of championship shooters out there. But with 407 league appearances with the Owls, you can tell that's where his heart is. And he's penned a new deal, even though it isn't really worth the paper it's printed on. Ike Ugbo won't score goals, but is a Canadian international, so must have some qualities. Their biggest weakness is they just don't have an out-and-out goal scorer. They also have no squad depth. It's going to be a long season with over-reliance on youngsters, and predictably, I do have them relegated. Chansiri should do the right thing and sell up. 23rd, Hull City. Last season, they were almost relegated, and this season can only be worse, with the Tigers placed under a transfer embargo. Sergej Jakivoric has, which is definitely butchered the pronunciation there, has no experience of championship or English football, coming in from, you guessed it, from a Turkish side in Kayserispor. Their best player is their best goalkeeper is probably Dylan Phillips, who spent the last 2 seasons with Rotherham United, who finished mid-table League One last season. Because I think despite Ivor Pandor being voted Hull City's best player last season, I do think it's highly likely for Hull to get out that transfer ban. They need to do sell players on like Pandor, for example. The defence is probably the strongest department of the club, with the likes of Lewis Coyle, Ryan Giles, Charlie Hughes, Joel Negan, Cody Drama, Semi Ajayi, and James Furlong all being options, and I think that's certainly championship standard. My issue is midfield, where only really John Lundstrom and Gustavo Puerta are championship standard. They possess all right wingers, but no decent forward to put those chances in the net. I know since I wrote this bit of this predictions, they did bring in Ollie McBurney, but he still, I don't think, is going to be able to consistently get them numbers at his age anymore. So with no João Pedro, the worst attack in the league last season has actually just been made worse. They'll be relying too much on their defence to get them out of mire, and if it wasn't for the Sheffield Wednesday situation, they would be bottom of the league for me. But alas, I still think they will be relegated. 22nd, Leicester City. Most people, will call me mad for this one, but let's look at the overall situation. Firstly, it is highly likely, I'm going to say, that at least some point this season, they will get a 9 points deduction, which creates a mental mountain to climb, especially after a very poor season last season that resulted in relegation. They've now got a very negative mentality at the club. So to start the season, you've got to get over that. to begin with. And to make things worse is all of the things that have changed at the club. Marty Cifuentes has come in as manager, right? So that's immediately a huge change in philosophy. I mean, he managed to keep QPR in the Championship and then mid-table following season, but the expectations of Leicester is playoff stroke automatic promotion, something that Cifuentes just won't do in one season. They've also lost club legend Jamie Vardy, so their main goal scoring output is gone. And they've also lost their goalkeepers in Daniel Iverson and Danny Ward, who, okay, I will admit, were not good enough in the Premier League, but they are very good goalkeepers in the Championship. Asmir Begovic hasn't really been a first choice keeper for years now, and the other two goalkeepers I think are just too young. Wilfred Ndidi is likely to leave now if he hasn't already. As a merchant, he has a £9 million release clause, and you expect he's just going to be one of a few more outgoings before the start of the season, or start like a closer window, that is. Such as Harry Winks, Oliver Skip, James Justin, and Val Face, I think all could be snapped up by potential suitors. Purely because they are Premier League standard, and none of the incoming signify to me a playoff challenging team, because it's been the quietest window I think I've seen for a relegated club. Maybe they just prevent themselves from getting into further bother of FFP, or it could be that they're just consolidating because their transfer policy before has been scattergun, to say the least. Also, we must remember this is the hardest Championship in years, as I started the video with all three promoted sides heavily investing, lots of bottom half table sides vastly improving as well, and other relegated sides strengthening much more than Leicester. I think this may be a harder season for Foxes than some may foresee, and I think it will end in another relegation. We've seen it a lot recently, haven't we? 21st, Blackburn Rovers. John Eustace was the architect of last season's success with Blackburn, revolutionising the squad from relegation battlers to playoff challengers. But now Eustace has gone, and the club, I think, has already downgraded. Furthermore, the heart of the squad has been wrenched out, with Beck opting to go on loan with Derby. It was highly unlikely he was going to come back to Blackburn on loan, admittedly. But as well as Derby taking their players of Vyman Bath, so a lot of experience there. The best player, Callum Britton, has left. And their right-back department weakened further when Rankin Costello moved on to Charlton. Tyrese Dolan opted to go to Spain. And Lewis Travis, coming into the final year of his contract, is more than likely to be sold rather than risk him losing for nothing. That's a lot of quality, actually, to lose in one window. And they have made a huge gamble in some of the signings. They've got players from Belgium, Portugal, Scotland, Sweden. So it'll be interesting to see how they adapt to the Championship. And I think it will take a little bit of time for them to get used to the more, physical nature of the league. But I must say, I do like the signing of Axel Henriksen, who, as an attacking midfielder, scored 26 in 76 appearances with GAIS. I must say this squad looks quite weak, and with Vela and Ishmael, I think, underperforming with that Watford side that actually should have been realistically challenging for playoffs last season. If Blackburn have expectations of a similar season to last, then they are way overestimating themselves. And would they give Ishmael time if things don't pan out the way that they expect in a similar expectations from that last season? I say we need to be good enough to stay up, but I think it will be a close run thing. You could potentially need actually over 50 points to stay in the Championship this season, which is absolutely mental to think. 20th, Middlesbrough. Lots of people are praising the inspired appointment of Rob Edwards as manager. But let's for a minute forget that achievement to get Luton promoted in the last two seasons. He's overseen back-to-back relegation with Luton. By the bookies' odds, they were actually anticipating Luton to make an immediate return to the Premier League. Also, when he was with a club that had high expectations for the playoffs, which Borough do have, by the way, he experienced that with Watford and was sacked by the end of September with only 3 wins and 10. Now, if he didn't get Luton promoted that one season, which he did, you look on his CV, he got a team promoted to League One who were heavily financially backed. He then, with a team that were also heavily financially backed, I'll go back over that again because I think I've met stuff I need a comment on. He got a team promoted to from League One to the Championship. He then got a team that was expecting minimum playoffs and lasted only a month in poor form in that. He then went, if you skip a season, got a team from the Premier League relegated and then relegated again. Something that only has happened 3 times before, then during the Premier League era, of the teams in Sunderland, Wolverhampton Wanderers and Swindon Town. To be fair, just look, that to me would be like saying John Gorman would be a good appointment as first team manager of West Bromwich Albion in 1994-95. It's utterly bizarre how his reputation is intact and not in tatters. The defence for me is the reason they'll stay up because that is quality, but they lost Coburn and Hayden Hackney, I think, very highly likely to go to the Premier League. I think that makes the midfield quite weak, especially seeing this transfer is dragging on a bit. So they may not have time to spend the money they get for him to find a replacement. I think Edwards is anything but inspired, and in a tough Championship, I think they're in for a shock this season in a relegation battle. 19th, Wrexham. A team with an inflated ego and a feeling of self-worth that only reason is there is because of the Hollywood owners. And they have never known a struggle since they've come in of how to get promoted and whatever. But you do actually look at some of the underlying data last season in League One, and you actually look, it was very poor in the scoring department. They only had 67 goals last season, which for a top 6 side, it's a bit average. It's not something I would scream home and write home about as a team coming up from League One in. And they were also frequently struggling against some of the stronger opponents and only won many of the games actually by a solitary goal to nil. The Championship is an absolute class above, with Wrexham no longer being the big boys and aren't even financially the strongest either. I also think the squad is quite aged with low resale value, so they will definitely run into FFP problems in the future. They've signed players like Kiefer Moore, Connor Cody, Josh Windass, Danny Ward, all the wrong side of 30. Also have a very heavily bloated squad, as they can't move on any of the deadwood, as they all either want to be part of a Wrexham project of the upward trajectory, despite most of them not being good enough for Championship, and the other one's just not, but they're too old to be able to find a new club somewhere. So that just invariably leads to a fractured dressing room because they all want to get a bit involved with this squad, but you can't field 30 players on the pitch at the same time. Now, so far lost £13 million, and I don't see any of these players being able to be sold to recuperate this loss. We also know older squads are more injury prone as well. That is just a fact of nature. The Championship is also much higher intensity than lower down the pyramid. Something I saw firsthand as a Derby fan, for example. And to stay up, actually, you need a good defence, which is actually Wrexham's weakest position. I think they have enough Championship experience to stay in the league, but I think it will be an underwhelming season with a long relegation battle. And it will be interesting to see if the Hollywood owners just splash the cash in January on short-term fixes, or whether they'll sack the manager and try something else with that. And he was the reason that all this success happened in the first place. Or whether they just view this season as one to actually settle down and actually start changing the transfer strategy come January. I honestly couldn't tell you what they're planning, but I think this squad is far too bloated, has several gaps in the squad, but can't fill those ones because the players that they have are League One standard and they need to move them on in order to bring in the ones to improve. We may well see the Hollywood project hit a bit of a brick wall this season. 18th, Oxford United. The situation surrounding the stadium is a very odd one, with the owners claiming the long-term future of Oxford is not stable at a new ground. I don't think the squad is that strong either, so won't be much stronger than a team in the bottom half of the table, maybe in danger at some point of relegation. The reason I'm not predicting any lower than 18th is the Gary Rowett effect, really, as the Championship veteran manager does know what it takes to grind out results in this league and therefore knows what it will take to ensure Oxford's survival. They haven't made many signings, rather, but I will say defensive midfielder Brian de Keersmacher could be a really clever signing. Overall, this side is no different really from the side which finished 17th last season, and accordingly, I think it will be quite a similar season. The biggest area they need to strengthen is bringing a forward who can score more than with top goal scorer last season, Mark Harris, who only scored 6 goals last season. 17th, Charlton Athletic. I actually really like the transfer strategy that the Addicts have implemented this transfer window. They brought in Thomas Kaminski as a goalkeeper, who I rate quite highly, actually. Who, despite getting relegated with Luton last season, made the 3rd highest amount of saves of any keeper in the Championship. Isaac Oluwafe is coming to his prime, scoring 20 goals only 2 seasons ago as well. Amari Bell has been in the Championship for a while now. Reece Burke is someone you want alongside you in the trenches. I would have loved Charlie Kelman as well to come to Derby because his 21 goals in 46 appearances last season and a further 5 assists. And he's only 23, by the way, so still young to consider, to definitely the sort of player you really want in that side. Similarly, can be said for Harvey Nibbs, who has reached double figures for goals in the last 2 League One seasons, including 14 last season. They certainly have made the signings that will improve them going forward, an area that definitely needed strengthening. But they've also signed good players who are a good age, so have a resale value, unlike Wrexham. Nathan Jones does love a good underdog spell, and with Luton he did wonders. And I think with this season as a transition, we could maybe see Charlton go strength to strength under his guidance. I overall think a good consolidating year in the Championship, finishing lower mid-table. 16th, Birmingham City. Many people seem to back the Blues for back-to-back promotion, presumably because of the recent successes of Ipswich and Luton in doing the same thing. But I tell you now, they have another surprise coming for them. For one, they will be punished by FFP in the long run. I can guarantee you that. I also think you look at the recent history of Birmingham in the Championship and it has been pretty bad reading, you know. And yes, I know they have new owners, but this squad is mid-table at best for me. Yes, you can point to the Bielicks, Cashin, Stansfield, Allsops, Asai Samuels, Lee Buchanans, and Damari Grays of this world, but they're the only players I rate. And ironically, actually, half of them played for Derby, and during that time with Derby, were ending up in a relegation battle in the Championship, right? They let Alfie May go, which is a very self-defeating move, as Lyndon Dykes has had his time, and I, to be honest, think Alfie May would have been a better player to have than Lyndon Dykes. Farhassi has had limited playing time at present, so could pick up an injury if rushed in too quickly. And Stansfield is still young and raw at this level. I actually don't think a mid-table finish, though, is too bad, because I think it provides a stable platform to build upon, and the side time to adjust and up their levels. Then you look at Chris Davis. He's a very young, inexperienced manager whose style of football is a lot like Brendan Rodgers or Roberto Martinez or Pep Guardiola, as he focuses a lot on possession-based football, controlling the ball, really. Now, this may be successful in the Premier League, and I don't doubt it is, and where the best teams are possession-based, or in League One where the pace is slow and defenders tend to hold back and let you play a bit more. The Championship, by and large, is quite a unique beast, where lots of teams tussle for control of a possession, with defenders willing to go and take on attackers more, and then try to turn possession over and get the ball at the other end of the pitch to the other end. This end-to-end evenness in quality is not seen really anywhere else in the world, because every team is capable of outperforming another team on their day. It's why so many people call it most exciting league in the world. So the question remains, how does Davis's team cope when out of possession? They could adapt really well and propel themselves up the league, or they may initially struggle against a style they aren't used to, and it becomes a flat mid-table season, while managing a team that learned to change tactics. Don't get me wrong, I think in the long run, Birmingham will definitely go in the right direction. One, they're not underdogs for back-to-back promotions, which is what ended up with Luton and Ipswich because nobody expected it. And two, they're a side that I think is, as just all of the reasons I just listed, they've got a manager who's relatively inexperienced and a lot of players whose main experience in Championship comes in the lower half. 15th, Stoke City. We've grown accustomed to Stoke being a mid-table side now, and unfortunately, I just can't see this season being any different. Mark Robins, I will always rate as a good manager, but he is a one-club manager, like Nigel Clough at Burton or Darren Ferguson at Peterborough. Robins has only ever had what would be considered success at Coventry City. So while he is still at Stoke, I don't see Stoke making any playoff charge. The defenders have definitely improved, though, with Talavirov and Aaron Cresswell coming in. Sorba Thomas provides that championship know-how, and Slovakian international Robert Bozanic, who has a good mix of technicality and physical ability, able to set the ball up well from the top, but I would say is a target man to play off from. In that vein, a very different type of forward to, say, a Niall Ennis, who left. The big problem will be goalkeeping, as I think it's almost a guarantee that Victor Johansson, who made the most saves in the Championship last season and was a 8th best save percentage for a team who could possibly have been relegated last season if it wasn't for him, and was definitely Stoke's best player last season. And so, yeah, I feel like he will probably end up going for Premier League this summer, as he's still a couple of years away from peaking. So maybe a team like West Ham would make perfect sense for him at this time of the year, or maybe to some team who are a strong team in Europe, for example, as well, could also be one. So who do they have as backup? We got Jack Bonham, who is a 31-year-old who has done nothing with his career, probably League One standard at best. Or you have Frank Fielding, who hasn't been a starting goalkeeper since 2017-18, and at 37 is probably more looking at coaching courses than being a regular goalkeeper. It certainly is a difficult call to make, as they can't buy a new goalkeeper without Johansson leaving, because otherwise there is no point, because you can't have two really good, well, you can have two really good goalkeepers, but if your expectations, which I think is Stokes this season, is to build a squad capable of competing in this league, and so just treading water, you aren't going to have two really good goalkeepers wanting to waste their time. They also have one of the worst set of defenders. Like, I'm going to be honest, the reason that the save percent, like saves, were so high for Johansson because of how bad the defense was. And they've had some slight improvements, but this is still an atrocious backline for Stoke standards. I just think it'll be another predictable mid-table season. 14th, Queen's Park Rangers. They may have lost Cifuentes, but I actually think they have upgraded with Julian Stephan, who has won the Coupe de France with Rennes and finished 6th with Strasbourg, which now with Rossignol there may not seem too unusual, but that was their highest finish since 1979-80. He's clearly a manager, therefore, that overperforms expectations, taking small clubs and putting them into a position of strength. It will probably take a season for him to get used to that English football style of play. But if they persevere with him, I could see him, I could see really a bit of a quality that he has coming to QPR. And maybe in a few years' time, he'll be knocking on the door of the playoffs. The transfer strategy, though, of QPR is always an interesting one. They take youngsters from obscurity, with probably the most well-known this window being Poku, who was a diamond in the rough of Peterborough last season, and turn these players into absolute gems to sell on to a larger club. This has been done with Eberechi Eze and Bright Asaya Samuel. And if it wasn't for the injury when it came to somebody like Elias Chair, he probably would have done so as well. I think a lot of young players possibly see this team as a stepping stone to enter the Premier League because they've got good relations with clubs like Palace and West Ham and some of the local London teams and Brentford. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, as it enables quality. The only issue is a high turnover of players, which unfortunately means they do tend to drift in mid-table more often than not nowadays. If they can retain those youngsters when they're shown themselves in January, then actually they could have a strong end to the finish of the season. Alas, I don't think this will be the case, as they also have to adapt to a new manager and therefore will finish mid-table. 13th, Bristol City. They've lost what made them successful, and that is Liam Manning, whose high-pressing, high-possession style bore much success, taking Bristol City from mid-table to a side challenging for the playoffs. Actually, they finished in the playoffs. Gerhard Struber comes back to the Championship, where he kept Barnsley up and created the team that finished in the playoffs under Ishmael. Since then, he's done an all-right job getting the clubs he's managed to where they've roughly been expected to be. The thing with a Struber side is that he needs to build a side in his image, which is far more data-driven than Manning was. Signings like Emil Rees-Jacobson, Joe Lumley, and Adam Randall are championship standards, but signings, but certainly not aspirational ones for more than a mid-table finish. I do look at this side, and their success was built upon team spirit and cohesion, with the cement being Manning. And with that boat now being rocked, I think it may be a bit more of a rocky season and back to the mid-table mediocrity that we were so used to Bristol being like for years. 12th, Preston North End. This was a side where I felt at the end of last season would be in real jeopardy of relegation this season. They ended last season poorly and the squad looked weak and tired. This isn't necessarily Paul Heckingbottom's fault, as we know he's a decent championship manager, seen by him gaining promotion for Premier League with Sheffield United, for example. Furthermore, I now look at some of the signings and they have addressed some of the key weaknesses. Firstly, Freddie Woodman was their best player, but they were never going to keep hold of him if he chose to go to Liverpool. So they needed to find an adequate replacement, and I think the former Lillywhite, Daniel Iverson, is the perfect match, as arguably his best time as a footballer came in 2021-22 when he was with Preston North End on loan, where he was their best player. Thierry Small is a pacey and powerful left-back with good ball-striking ability and stamina, and can also play central defence or left wing, but I think he's wasted in the former of those positions. Northern Irish international Jordan Thompson comes off several mediocre championship seasons with Stoke, but certainly looked assured in midfield and is a mid-table championship player. Championship veteran Michael Smith comes in to replace Emil Rees, who, much like Emil Rees, I think can be inconsistent at times, but is a good option to have off the bench. Daniel Jebison more likely comes in as first choice. I actually found out while researching this that he went to the secondary school in the neighbouring area to mine, back where I lived in Derby. And although he was never part of Derby's academy setup or whatever, he was the year above me in school, as he was only 22 years old. So there may be somebody that I knew in school who knew him. I do remember his time at Burton, though, on loan, where he chipped in with 7 goals in 20 games, which to date has been his most consistent run in a team. So I think he just needs game time, but there's definitely a player in there. Getting some of the deadwood out of the club is something which has been needed for a while, and that was done by removing Emil Rees, Ryan Ledson, and Ched Evans. I think overall this side needed a bit of a restructure. Otherwise, they were sleepwalking to relegation, and I think that has been done. So we shall see a return of Preston in mid-table this season. 11th, Watford. I see a lot of people saying that Watford are likely to finish in the playoffs or just outside it, and I can somewhat see the rationale. Now, I don't profess to have ever heard of Paulo Pezzolano, and on a surface level, his spells in Brazil and Uruguay seems a decent manager, to be honest. But knowing Watford, I'll give him until November, and then they'll get bored and try and find someone else. But you do look at some of those signings and think they can be decent this year. Nathan Baxter is a young keeper who was semi-decent with Bolton last season. Mark Bowler is very versatile, but most likely to be a left-back who was decent with Middlesbrough last time around he was in the Championship. Cypriot international Hector Cipriano is young at 24, and I think he's ready to take a step up. Vivaldo Semedo is definitely a sign for the future at 20 years old, as is 19-year-old Othmani Mama. So I think these signings are young and talented and will definitely pay off in the long run. I just think this season may be one where everyone adapts to the pace of the Championship and will probably look like an outside chance of playoffs but fall well short just because of a lack of experience. So when you get into that final run-in time around about February, you want your experienced players to come to the fore then. And if you've mainly got a bunch of youngsters, it can be very tough. 10th, Millwall. Another side tipped by a few for playoffs is Millwall. I have mixed views, though, on Alex Neil in the Championship. So obviously he did well to win the playoffs in 2015 with Norwich. But since then, has mainly been a bottom half Championship manager, except for a couple of seasons like the one where he took Sunderland back to the Championship, or one when he got relegated from the Prem at Norwich. But I think that's actually the stumbling block, really, to Millwall's progression, who, don't get me wrong, looked very good last season at the Den. But come on. Max Croker, that is an interesting signing itself. He's never experienced for Championship. Not to say he's not a good goalkeeper, but is he an upgrade on Lucas Jensen? And I would say in the long term, Absolutely not. I mean, his last spell came with Burton, keeping them just up in the League One. Stephen Bender is another goalkeeper who comes in, but he lacks experience, so actually kind of on the other end of the spectrum, and he's only on loan. We know Josh Coburn possesses certain attributes which make him a match with Millwall beyond his goal-scoring record, which is about 1 in every 3 or 4 games. Australian international Massimo Luongo is, I think, real quality in the Championship. He dictates playing that deep midfield role, transitioning defence to attack. Alfie Doherty is an absolute steal, who I'm surprised didn't sign for a Premier League side when Luton were relegated from a Premier League. That's a couple of seasons back now. And has certainly got resale value to him, I would say. I would say a lot of the Millwall old guard have moved on as well, with the likes of George Honeyman, George Saville and Murray Wallace all moving on. Depends if you count Zion Fleming as well as the old guard, because he did sign in 2022, but he's still only 27 and he's coming to his peak now. But he was on loan with Burnley last season, and let's be honest, was never going to stick around for Millwall once that happened, how good he was. But I think that's going to be a huge miss for Millwall's attacking partner, and I think you saw that last season. I think this side is certainly capable of playoffs and will challenge for them. I just don't think Alex Neil possesses a fortitude or style of play conducive with achieving them, so we'll finish for another season just short in 10th. 9th, Coventry City. I do rate, unlike some, Frank Lampard as manager, but that's maybe because of what he did with Derby County in that playoff semi-final. But I do think he is a good Championship manager with his attacking philosophy and playing out from the back. Now, he isn't a manager who uses the wings a lot, preferring wing-backs in a 4-2-3-1 system with 2 either side of the centre, more cutting inside the box. For example, that's something that Harry Wilson did when he was with Derby. Maybe thinks he has all the things Everton needed for another playoff charge in the squad as is, because the only signing of note has been Kane Kessler-Hayden, who is one of those wing-backs I alluded to, but is still quite young and raw. I don't think there is a good goalkeeper at the club at the moment, but there probably hasn't been for quite some time. I'm also not overly convinced on the centre-backs. I think the midfield is stacked, though, with the likes of Rodoni, Grimes, Jamie Allen, Ben Sheaf and Haji Wright. Is also a decent centre-forward, although Sims and Thomas Asante were far too inconsistent last season. I've got to say, I think Coventry are a team who fundamentally overperform, but they consistently do so. And I will say they are in the hunt for the playoffs, but this season falls short. But then again, I could end up with egg on my face come to the end of the season. And yet again, they are competing in the playoffs. 8th, Norwich City. With Liam Manning coming to Carrow Road, I think there will be improvements made from last season's mid-table mediocrity implemented by Thurup. They have had an overhaul of the squad, it's fair to say. Exciting youngster Jacob Wright is back permanently, and certainly looking forward to seeing a full season from the midfielder. They now have competition for goalkeeper with Daniel Grimshaw, Vladan Kovacevic, and George Long, all eager for that number 1 spot. Harry Darling proved himself with Swansea as more than capable of being Championship standard. Matthias Kvistgaarden scored 17 goals in 29 appearances last season with Danish Superliga. So if you can translate that into a Championship, you have an absolute goal machine on your hands there, Norwich. Jeffrey Schlupp is known for his time at Crystal Palace, making almost 250 appearances in all competition, and is known for his extreme pace and athleticism, capable of playing anywhere down that left wing. With strength and speed, I think he'll be a real threat to Championship defenders. It certainly is an upgrade on Onel Hernandez for me. I would point out the one weakness at present, in my opinion, is right wing and the depth in attacking midfield. But for the start of a project on the road back to the Premier League, this is certainly going to be an exciting season. And it really just tells you about the standard of the Championship this season, but I don't think they'll make the playoffs. 7th, Derby County. I've heard a fair few Derby fans that I follow tipping us to be dark horses this Championship. Now, I don't know if 7th is technically considered a dark horse, but it is certainly a huge improvement from where we were last season. I highly doubt we will end up like Ed Dawes of BBC Radio Derby suggests in 3rd place, but I think top half is very realistic. John Eustace has a track record of taking teams who are in danger of relegation to playoff challengers the season after in the Championship, as has been shown by both his spells at Birmingham City and with Blackburn Rovers. We've also brought in some unbelievable players. Carlton Morris is strong and able to hold the ball up. A sort of player I don't think we've actually had at Derby since Chris Martin. And he's a regular goal scorer at this level. He scored 20 goals in 2022-23. This was 11 in the Premier League only 2 seasons ago. Danny Bart comes with a wealth of experience into the back, and that adds to the back line. We lost some of that in Sonny Bradley, although I didn't rate him as a championship level. And I think we haven't really had a championship level experienced centre-back. I'm not saying that we haven't had a championship level centre-back, but in terms of experience since Curtis Davis. Andreas Weimann comes back to the club where if you went to 2021-22, he scored 22 goals in the championship. And he still chipped in with 7 last season. The issue is when he was last time at Derby, he was stuck out on the wing because Vidra was the centre forward. And we didn't really have a number 10 that season because of the way we were playing. We tended to be playing in more of a... it was slightly weird sort of formation, I remember, under Rowett. It was sort of... We tended to have like a 4-3-3 of sorts, but we had Tom Huddleston at the base and then Bryson on one side. And I don't remember who the other midfielder was in that midfield 3. But yeah, it was very defensive minded as well. So the wing play was something he opted for, and just don't think Wyman's a winger. Patrick Agyemang has scored 5 goals in 12 appearances for the USA national team, and is also a different type of striker to what we already possess, as he's got absolute speed in abundance. Ryan Brewster has had an unfortunate recent history of injuries, but let's not forget his 10 goals in 20 appearances for Swansea when he had a consistent run-in. He just needs to get his self-belief back, really, in my opinion. Owen Beck slots in at left-back position. We didn't really have a natural starter at left-back, to be honest, with Elder, in my opinion, being absolutely rubbish. And Peters and Forsyth, both wrong end of 30, who, don't get me wrong, are great at centre-back, I think, and that's where I can see Forsyth being this season. But I'm not convinced that he can still do them marauding runs every single week that Beck will be able to do. David Ozo was great before he got injured last season, and I don't think his type of player who can spray passes was replaced when he unfortunately returned to Palace because of the injury. And then we sold Cashin, who was the other player in that sort of defensive midfield role who could spray passes. Bobby Clark reminds me of Mason Mount as well, as someone who can connect those 2 boxes. Young but extremely talented. Dion Sanderson follows Eustace everywhere, but I think will more likely provide cover. These incomings already add to a very decent side defensively, certainly in Derby. I mean, you've got Ibu Adams, who I think did the most tackles from a defensive midfielder role in the Championship last season. 2 of the best keepers Derby have had in years in Zetterstrom and Vickers, and they'll be battling it out. You've got Forsyth, Clark, Nelson, Langas, and Rooney all competing for those centre-back roles. And I actually, in my opinion, think that when Langas came in, he proved himself, and I think is at the moment probably Derby's best player that I've seen from last season, because he was injured and he was still immense. So yeah, third competition added to that position. Ryan Nyambe, I think, is a great defensive right back. I don't think he's that good going forward, but on the other hand, you have Kane Wilson, who is a great attacking fullback, so can do that role. Howlman, who is technically very good. I just think he needs to bulk out a bit. Liam Thompson, who is a proper ratter of a player. You know, he rats around his players and just stealing the ball and then transitioning play. Blackett Taylor, who I have actually wrote off in the past, has had a huge, an absolute immense pre-season, scoring 5 goals this pre-season and winning 3 penalties. I would say, if he continues that form into this season, will be certainly a threat from the wings. Salverson, I think, once fully fit, will be much like Haaland, actually, because I think he has a similar mould of player. Also, we have some exciting options coming through the academy with Jay Rooney, Liam Thompson, Deshaun Brown, Agbo Adikizu. I'm not pronouncing that one again. And Gordon as well. All looking exciting prospects for the future. Generally, the only weakness I see in this side is the left wing, actually, as I don't think Caden Jackson is good enough. and some depth options in the wings would be hugely helpful as well. The only reason I can't see us making the playoffs actually is we do have a poor track record with injuries at present, especially with our squad at the moment. I don't think we'll have a fully fit squad or a squad capable of really having a headache for the manager till after the first international break. So that could hamper a bit of our season, a bit of a slow start, but come the end of the season, well in the race for the playoffs, I think. 6th, Swansea City. Alan Sheehan immediately improved Swansea. When he came in towards the end of last season, I think it was just so exciting to watch Swansea play. And I think if over a full season he can be a really exciting management style. But my prediction for playoffs is actually based more upon the strengthening they've done this summer. Cameron Burgess is an Australian international who is a key component of that consecutive winning Ipswich side. Ricardo Santos, who we talked about in the League One predictions, as he, in my opinion, is one of the greatest defenders in League One recently. So if he can convert those performances in the Championship, they have another good centre-back option. Ethan Galbraith is a Xavi or Iniesta style player who can pick a pass of all different varieties. A Northern Irish international and still relatively young at 24, showing composure in midfield beyond his years. I think it's a well-balanced squad, actually, with a decent defence. We saw from Burnley last season that defence is actually now more critical for success in the Championship because they had the best defence record of almost all time. It was only it wasn't even 20 goals they conceded. But goals do actually tend to win matches as well. So I think the lack of a consistent goal scorer may prohibit them from going beyond a playoff finish. 5th, West Bromwich Albion. Ryan Mason is an unknown quantity coming into the Championship this season as manager. So this prediction could well be completely somewhere else come the end of the season. Nat Phillips is a great signing as someone who saw him at Derby last season. He is a model professional and composed at the back, able to keep the ball well clear of the penalty area, which is what you want your defenders to do. George Campbell has been tipped to be the answer to America's defence, which is that national team's weakness at the moment. But I actually think there isn't too much that needs improving with the side. Joe Wildsmith, I remember from his time at Derby, being a dependable pair of hands in goal. Darnell Furlong is your archetypal wingback who spent the last 6 years for West Brom, becoming a player synonymous really with the club. Callum Styles is a player I have rated since his Barnsley days, where especially that time in 2020-21, where he was a key reason for that side reaching the Championship playoffs. They seem to have a couple of Norwegian internationals at the club as well, which I recently have witnessed at Derby. And I would say like the Eliteserien and the Allsvenskan in sort of the Scandinavian area are probably roughly the same level of a Championship at the top end of that and them respective leagues anyway. Malumbi is someone who can slot anywhere in midfield, both attacking and defensively, due to his high energy levels, who is confident with the ball and looks to make probing passes. Diakite is one of those bright sparks who looks like the making of a player to be involved in the Malian golden generation. He hasn't actually had a senior appearance yet, but he's only 25, so I think he could potentially be a key cog for Mali in the future. Alex Mowat is one of those players which I would say is a luxury player in the Championship. And I'm actually surprised he has never gone to the Premier League, considering how many seasons he's frequently been at the better end of a Championship. Ched Wallace is a right winger. So I think another dependable Championship starman there. He did well. He's done well with West Brom and he's also done well with Millwall. Josh Maja scored 12 goals last season in 26 appearances, almost a goal every other game. Feels like Karlan Grant has been around for years, thinking on those 19 goals in 43 Championship games back in 2019-20. But he's still only 27 years old, so he's actually coming into his peak years now. If Mikey Johnston can rekindle the form he had as well towards the end of 2024, when on loan with West Brom, there's another solid player there. Devante Cole and Daryl Dike are players who have been around for a Championship a fair bit, and they're not even likely to make the starting 11 at the moment. I think defensively and attacking-wise, this side is capable of playoffs with some very Championship-standard players. The issue last season was the stacking up of injuries that occurred, meaning a poor end of the season. And the problem might be a bit of a lack of depth in midfield. I imagine Mason will be keen to do a high-intensity attacking play, trying to outscore the opposition. And I will say he has those players at his disposal, so could work a treat ending up in the playoffs. Fourth, Portsmouth. This is the team who I really think are the dark horses this season. We've seen a pattern emerging over recent seasons of sides who were in League One not long ago and a bit of an underdogs, challenging for promotion. We saw it with Sunderland, Ipswich Town, Luton Town, Barnsley and Coventry City, all in the last 5 or 6 seasons. We know Fratton Park is a real fortress where I think it will be really hard to beat them this season. John Messino is a man who took Portsmouth from 15th place in League One to survive on the Championship in their first season back at this level in 12 years. He was also the only Championship manager to last for full season last season of the side who, out of the sides, it's obviously ones who got promoted tended to keep their managers. I don't know about ones who were relegated either. I think Luton did, potentially. It wasn't the end of the season. Rob Edwards moved on. I can't remember. But in terms of ones that were not promoted or relegated, he was the only one who didn't get the sack. We all know the beast of John Swift. He's an absolute, when it comes to Championship football, if he's fully fit and fully firing, he is a wonderful talent. I mean, look in 2023-24. So despite being an attacking midfielder come winger, he still scored 9 goals. I think Yang Min Hyuk may have a standout year of his career this season, who at 19 is doing his second ever loan spell. And we actually tend to see more that the second loan spells from the Premier League sides are really the making of a player. They've had a totally flawless pre-season, winning up all apart from 1 game. The ironic thing with this squad is you point to it and say, well, I don't think they're quite Championship standard in this position here or whatever, And then they put on an unbelievably dominant display. And I think to many, they will actually be the shock of this season, finishing in the playoffs. I just think they're really flying under the radar in some of that level of quality that their squad has. Third, Southampton. Now, unfortunately, the gap between the Championship and the Premier League has grown so large in recent years. The parachute payments just mean that you would naturally assume that Southampton will be challenging for an automatic return to the Premier League, despite being truly dreadful last season. Will Still is a great appointment, though, who is very technically minded, who has overperformed clubs' expectations wherever he has gone. The issue is he's coming in as a manager with very high expectations, whereas previously he was at clubs with very low expectations. And the thing is, this club was so poor last season that those expectations may end up outperforming reality. I will say Damien Downs is a great signing who scores an average 1 in 3 games. They have lost some of their big hitters, such as Kamaldeen Sulemana, Jan Bednarek, Aaron Ramsdale, and Kyle Walker-Peters. I imagine youth prospect Tyler Diblin will also move on as the window draws until we're closed, because despite being 19, he's just too good for the Championship. Same may well be the case with Tyler Hayward-Bayliss. However, they still possess enough quality to give the Championship a real good shot this season, with the likes of Captain Jack Stevens, Alex McCarthy, who will probably now retake the number 1 spot in goal, Ryan Manning, who I thought in the last season he was at Swansea was their best player, Flynn Downs, who is entering his peak now, and if he starts regularly this season, could be their best player. Harwood-Bellis is still in a contract, and while that remains so, another good defender to have. Nigerian international Joe Aribo, who is versatile, capable of playing midfield or out wide, who is technically proficient, able to use his body to shield the ball, and rise with the ball at pitch. Could this be Will Smallbone's standout season? I would certainly say so. You've got Adam Armstrong, who scored 21 Championship goals not that long ago in 2023-24. Ross Stewart was the reason Sunderland got promoted from League One with 24 more goals in that season. If they can get that front 2 firing, like they've done in the past, they will do well. I think this squad is, relatively speaking, one of the best in the Championship. I just think there are 2 better sides than the Saints, so they were going to miss out on automatics. Now, one of them 2 sides is going to be Ipswich Town. I've gone second place in for Ipswich. Clearly, they have seen the bigger picture here, with the owners having every justification to hit the panic button and then sack Kieran McKenna. I think they've done a very wise job and stuck with the faithful manager, faithfully to the manager, who's actually in return been quite faithful, because he certainly had a chance to jump as well. And I think this play that both of them will have will reap dividends. He's certainly been back this window as well with a hugely experienced David Button, who will probably come in as second choice goalkeeper. Azor Matusia, who could have chosen Premier League side to join because I think he's quite highly rated. Ashley Young is young by name, not by nature now at the age of 40, but has clearly still improved a lot with his driving up the pitch, defensive work, and whipping him crosses. And if there's one thing that Stanley Matthews has taught us, is that age is just a number. If you're fit enough, then you're able enough. Okay, they have lost a couple of stars in Liam Delap and captain Sam Morsey, but actually they have retained the bulk of that impressive side from a couple of seasons back. Alex Palmer was the equal best championship goalkeeper in 2023-24, sharing a Golden Glove. Harry Clark is a right back able of playing centre back or central midfield as he converts defence into attack by always looking forward. Leif Davis is one of those modern day attacking left backs who has a great crossing ability, set piece delivery, and create chances to provide assists. Luke Wolfenden may well come back as first choice centre back again this season, who was a fundamental part of the Tractor Boys back-to-back promotions. Ben Johnson, despite being 25, was certainly a great youngster when he burst onto the scene at West Ham, and I thought had the ability to make it to the very top. Connor Townsend is a championship mainstay, mainly known for his time at West Brom. Jacob Greaves was not only Hull City's best player, but the best centre-back in the championship in 2023-24, when Hull unexpectedly were involved in a playoff charge under a senior. Dara O'Shea is somebody who is a top-end championship centre-back. And these are all defenders, by the way, that McKenna has to choose upon. I do feel the midfield is a bit lightweight, but then you have the attacking intent of West Burns on the wing, cementing himself as an Ipswich legend with his performances from out wide. I expect George Hurst to have a breakthrough season as a mainstay because I think he could generally become a Golden Boot contender, which seems really mad to say considering he only scored 10 in the last 2 seasons. That's because Connor Chaplin has been their primary striker. And he is actually, though, no stranger to finding the back of the net himself, scoring 13 goals in the Championship last time around when they were at this level. But when they were in League One, he scored 26 goals. Jaden Philogene, I thought, was somebody who had a really bright future when he was on loan with Hull, scoring 12 goals in 32 appearances. But sort of faded a bit since then, but he's only 23 years old, so he does have time to rekindle that form. Amari Hutchinson has a lot of skills and tricks and all sorts, but he may well move on before the window closes. I think it is a bit likely. Ogbonna was all right with Luton in the Premier League, but has been too quiet, in my opinion, since. Let's not forget in 2023-24, though, Schmodix, who scored 27 goals in 44 championship games, obviously winning the Golden Boot and the best striker that season. And I think men genuinely be someone that every champion defence will be absolutely terrified to play against. One of the best strikers I think we've seen in the championship since you like some Mitrovic and Vidras and Jordan Rhodes were whacking them in. Nathan Broadhead is another player who will be trying to get a look in. This team, I think, is just stacked both offensively and defensively options. So no wonder they'll finish in the top 2. The only reason I think they won't make the title is the lack of midfield for me. And first, of course, is Sheffield United. We end the video like we started it with a club from Sheffield. The last 2 clubs that Ruben Sellers has been manager of have been absolutely carnage behind the scenes. So I think it will be interesting to see how he adapts to a club with high expectations and no background distractions. Louis Barry was a highly sought player due to his incredible performances last season in League One with Stockport, where he scored 15 goals in 23 games. The biggest loss, though, is arguably Vinicius Sousa, who I actually think is a Premier League standard defensive midfielder. Same can be said for Aned Ahmedovich, who is a centre-back coming into his prime years, and it doesn't surprise me to see the former club captain going to a club in the Champions League. Kiefer Moore was poor last season, but I don't think the Sheffield United play really suits Moore, whose style tends to be where you put the ball up to him and he holds the ball up for a shot or a layoff onto an on-rushing second striker. Sheffield United last season would have been promoted if it wasn't for two of the best teams we've ever witnessed get promoted. Both of these teams last season achieved 100 points in Burnley and Leeds. Like 90 points and not earning promotion is pretty much unheard of. Now, yes, there is calibre in the newbies in the league, and nothing can tell me that this Blade squad cannot win the league, especially with a manager like Ruben Sellers, who, against all odds, has managed to get his sides before looking upwards by the time he has left them. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please subscribe if you're new around it. Let me know your championship predictions down below in the comments. Quickly, just going to read Martin Ryan. We will win the league by Christmas. John Eustace will take on part-time the presidency of the USA after Trump signs an order and mistakes it for another year, a 3-year deal at Notts County. I love that comment. Barmy Eustace Army, you know, absolute highly rate John Eustace as a man. I think he's so down to earth, but he's also someone who's very technically minded and knows a lot about managing. Probably one of the best managers in the Championship, certainly top 3. The things he's done, he's not, all the clubs he's been at have not had a large budget, yet has somehow managed to overperform the expectations. So yes, thank you very much for watching. I will probably next be on for the live watch along in the EFL Cup game, Birmingham City versus Sheffield United. But I will see you all whenever I see you. But goodbye for now.